The biggest issue that the self-publisher has is they go to a book printer without having any knowledge about book printing. It impacts their time, it impacts money, and most importantly, it impacts the quality. My name is Antony Selvaraj. We are going to learn about book printing. You wrote a book, you have all the book print files ready. Now you go to a book printer and say you want to print a book. They ask you with a bunch of questions. What type of paper, what type of binding, and so many. And finally, they send you a quote. You don't understand a single thing in the quote. You will not understand a single thing. Then you go back and forth with the printer, and finally you settle with whatever the printer suggests. If you understand a little bit about the book specification, you'll be able to understand the quotation that the printer is sending, and it'll save you time and money, and you can come up with a good quality book. That is what we are going to learn about book printing. Five essentials to be prepared with. Book print technology, digital versus offset printing. And under the book specification, you need to know about the size, cover, and details of the text and the bindery. This is a simple book. To order this book, the book quotation will look like this. So you saw the book quotation, right? So to order one simple book, you saw the specifications there. Now imagine if you're ordering, this book or this book or or a bigger size book. So it's a little bit complicated, right? Let's look into the essentials now. Print technology, digital printing versus offset printing. We are not going to deep dive into the digital printing and offset printing. In simple term, digital printers, which means it's a small printing machine, and then offset printers, which means it's a huge printing machine. So depending on the quantity that you order, if you order like a 500 or 100 quantity, then they will be using a digital printer. And if you're using a 5,000 or a 50,000 quantity, then they'll be using an offset printer. Let's look at the advantages and the disadvantages of going on the digital space versus the offset printing side. It always comes to price, time, and quality. Let's look at the price. With the digital print, it's going to be very expensive, whereas with the offset print, it's going to be cheaper. So if you order like 100 or 500 quantity, you're going to pay a lot of price, whereas if you order like 5,000, 10,000 quantity, they'll use the offset printing and it'll be way cheaper. The reason is, by the time the digital printer prints one sheet, the offset printer will print 100 sheets. So digital printing, low quantity, high price, whereas offset printing, high quantity, low price. When it comes to the digital printing, you can get a low quality book or a high quality book. The reason is, some printers still using the old printer and some printers are migrated to the new printer. The reason why some printers are still hanging on to the old machine is, it's unlike this mobile phones, you buy version 1 today and use it for a couple of years and throw it away and buy a new version. It's $1,000. You can simply throw it and buy a new one. Whereas printing machines, they cost a lot of money. They cost from $2 to $5 million. So it's not easy to throw away. So some printing companies are still hanging on to the old machine. The problem is, the difference between the old printer and the printers that is coming in the recent years is the technology, the inkjet technology behind those digital printing machines is so huge. The difference is so huge that the quality changes a lot. The recent year's printing machine gives you a offset printing quality. So, if you're getting a low quality book, you should know that you are using a company which is using the old printer. So when it comes to the quality in the digital printing, low quantity, like a 500 quantity or 100 quantity book with the digital printing, you always have to choose the right printer. So here is this one. This one is the latest digital printing machine, and look at the quality. Okay, so choose the right company. Time. When it comes to the turnaround time, the digital print has the advantage over the offset printing because the digital printing is faster, whereas the offset printing is slow. The reason is the setup involved in digital printing process is minimal, whereas the offset printing process, the setup is a lot of work is involved. So if you order like 100 or a 500 quantity with the digital print, you can get it in 2 to 3 weeks, whereas with the offset print, it will take over a month. with a digital print like 100 or 500 quantity, you can even pay some premium price and get it within 2 weeks. So when it comes to the time, digital printing is faster. Next is the book specification. Book specification is very simple. There are 4 things involved in book specification. One is the finish size, book finish size, so the length and height of the book. The next is you need to know about the cover. The third one is the text. You need to know about the text. Text is the inside pages. And the last thing is how to take the text and the cover and bind it. Okay, these are the 4 things that you need to know about the book specification. So first, let's look at the finish size. You saw the standard finish sizes available like 6 by 9, 8.5 by 11, and you saw more sizes. Now there are even more sizes available. If you want, you probably have to pay a little bit more. So this is all about the finish size, the length and the height of the book. That's all you need to know about the finish size. So let's move on to the cover. In the cover, there are 2 things to know: is the thickness of the cover and the coating. Now, when it comes to the thickness, there is 10 point, 12 point, and 13 point. 10 point, 12 point, 30 point, they call it in the digital printing industry, whereas in the offset printing industry, they call it as 100 pound, 120 pound, 130 pound. So don't get confused. So it's just that the digital versus offset printing, they use a different terminology. Most commonly used, the main thing that you need to know is the most commonly used is the 10 point. So that's what most of the self-publishers uses, okay? Coding is very important to understand. There is a print involved. The print need to stand out. The print need to look vibrant. So the printers, they always use a coated material. So the only thing they'll be asking you is, do you want to print one side or do you want to print both sides? If you say you want to print one side, they'll use a one-side coated material. If you want to say both sides, they'll use a 2-side coated material. So in the quotation, you'll see C1S, which is coat one side, or you'll see C2S, which is coat 2 sides. Now, then they print the cover, and after printing, there is another coating is involved. The coating after the printing, you need to understand 2 things. One is the process and the other one is the finish. Now, the process is for the protection and the finish is for the look and feel of the cover. In the process, there are 2 types of process. One is the UV and the other one is the lamination. Now, for the UV coating, they use the liquid, whereas on the lamination, they use a thin film. UV protects from scratches, whereas the lamination protects from scratches and rain. UV is on a cheaper side, but it looks same like the lamination. Most of the self-publishers use UV. On the finish side, there is a gloss, matte, and soft touch. Gloss is shiny, matte is a little bit dull. Soft touches, you can feel the softness of on the cover. Matte and the gloss are supported by both UV and lamination, whereas the soft touch is supported only by the lamination. That's all about the coating. So now that you understand about the thickness of the cover, the coating process of the cover, and understanding, learning about the cover, this is how the sample, quotation, and the specification will look like. Text is nothing but the inside pages. So majority of the price that you pay go for the text. So let's look at the text very carefully. First is the page count. It's very simple. More the number of pages, more you pay. That's all about the page count. And the next is the print color. In print color, we can use black color or we can go with the full color premium. Black color is going to be cheaper and full color is going to be expensive. It's simple. It's all about the pricing for the color. Okay, black color or full color. And next is the paper. In the paper, we already looked at the cover. There are some difference between the cover and the text. For the cover, we always use coated material. The reason is the printing needs to stand out, so we always use a coated material. Whereas for the text, sometimes we use uncoated material. The reason is some of you users, they may want to write some notes on it or scribble something, and in that case, the coated material will not be suitable. So we also use uncoated material for the text. Free books, coaching material, training material, or planners, you use uncoated papers like cookbooks, magazine, like children books. Then you want these books to be standing out, so like vibrant. So you use the coated paper. Coated paper comes in 3 types. One is glossy, silk, and matte. Glossy is shiny, and matte is dull, and silk is like in between. So a lot of our clients uses the silk paper. And the next is the thickness. In the thickness, we already looked at the cover thickness, like 10 point, 12 point. In text, we don't use the terminology point. We always use pound. 50 pound, 60 pound, 70 pound, 80 pound, 100 pound. That in US they call it pound, whereas in Europe and other countries they call it GSM. So you probably have to do some conversion to find the right thickness of the paper. And thickness plays a major role in the price. The more the thickness is, more the price you pay. 50 pounds, 50 pounds, 60 pounds, they are cheaper, whereas like 80 pound, 100 pound, they're expensive. And who uses 50 pound and who uses 100 pound? So if you're writing a book and you want to give it for free, or if you write like a coaching material, you simply stay with the 50 pound and 60 pound. Majority of the self-publishers use that. Whereas if you have a cookbook, magazine, or a high-end book, then you go with the 80 pound and 100 pound. For the planners, you probably have to stay in the middle, like use a 70 pound. The reason is you have, when you use like a marker, when you use like a marker or something you don't want to see through. So you stay with the 70 pound. You don't want to go with the 50 pound or 60 pound. Okay. Now that's all about the text. We looked at all the, 4 things, the page count, the color, the paper material, and the thickness. Now that we know a little bit about the text, let's look at how the specification will look like. Binding. Apart from the text, the other important factor that impacts the cost is binding. So we have the text, we have printed the cover. How do we bind it together? That's what there are 4 types of binding comes in place actually: perfect bind, case bind, coil bind, and wire. First, let's look at the perfect bind. Perfect bind is nothing but a soft cover binding. So the cover is soft. It's not like a hard case. The cover is soft. So they call perfect bind or soft cover binding. Okay. So in the binding process, they use either the glue or they use stitching process. In this case, we used glue. There is also stitching process used. Now, perfect binding is cheaper and the turnaround time is faster compared to the case bind, coil bind, and wire. And let's see who will use a perfect bind. What type of books will be good with the perfect binding. Now, anything other than the journals or a high perception books like keepsakes, you can simply go with the perfect bind because it's cheaper and it's faster too. There is one limitation with the perfect bind is if the number of pages are like 30 or 40, for a small book, the gluing process or the trimming process, it doesn't support very well. So you have 2 options. Either you can use like a thicker paper pay like a text, like 100 pound text, or if you don't want to use a thicker stock, then the other option is, instead of perfect bind, you can simply go with the saddle stitch. That's the other type of a stitching process. They use a saddle stitch. Case binding is nothing but the hardcover binding. Now here is the sample hardcover book. You see how hard is the cover is? So this is a sample hardcover book. Just like the perfect binding, we use glue or stitching to bind the book. There are a couple of things that we need to learn in the case binding. One is the chipboard and other one is the end sheet. Now this is a sample chipboard. So we use this chipboard to make this case. Now this chipboard, it comes in different thickness, 88 point, 98 point, and so we use a standard one, which is a 98 point. So it comes in different thickness. So when we look at the end sheet, so in every case bind book, the first and the last page, you'll see a blank page actually. You'll see a blank page. For the first and the last page will be blank. Now if you go with the digital printing, it'll be a plain white page. Whereas if you go with the offset printing, we can even print on that blank, on the page, and it also comes in different colors actually. So offset printing you can print, but with the digital printing you will not be able to print on the blank sheet. Okay, so those are the two things that we need to learn: chipboard and the end sheet in the case binding. And other than that, the price is obviously it's going to be higher than the perfect bind, and the turnaround time is going to be slower. And let's see who will use that. There's like children's book, cookbook, any high value book, you can use the case binding. So that's all about the case binding. Now that we learned about the case binding, let's look at how the sample specification will look like. Next is the coil binding. In coil binding, they use a plastic coil to bind the cover and the text. Now here is a sample coil bind book. Now this is the plastic coil that is used to bind the cover and the text. So this plastic coil, it comes in black, white, and different colors. Coil bind supports only the soft cover. It doesn't support the hard cover, and it's cheaper than the wire. Pretty much like training materials and journals, we use coil bind. In the wire binding, we use a metal coil instead of the plastic coil. I'll show you the sample. Now, this is the hardcover wire binding. Look at the material and look how beautiful it is. This is a hardcover wire binding, and here we use the metal instead of the plastic coil. And this metal coil, it comes in black, white, silver, and gold. So wire binding supports both soft cover and hard cover, whereas coil bind supports only soft cover. And wire binding is a little bit expensive than the coil binding. And wire binding is used for, similar to the coil binding. It's used for journals and the training materials, but with high value. Now that's all about the binding, and that pretty much sums up the book printing. Thank you for watching this video.